What's up, Model FAs? David DeCelle here, your host of the Model FA podcast and CEO of Model FA. And today we are joined by two folks who I've had an opportunity to build a really good relationship with. They're a part of the exchange that we have, and they are just not only awesome in their field of work, but they're just great humans as well. Joined by Angela York and Elyse Stoner. Thank you for joining the show. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us. This is
Of
great.
course. Well, let's rock and roll. I know we have a lot to go through today, and this will of course be very much value packed. But for purposes of credibility and to help set the stage. And Angela, maybe you can kick us off here. Give us a sense of your background, and Elyse, I'll toss it over to you as well.
Thanks, David. Well, I started my career in the advisor services space, in the marketing space, working in-house in the late 90s at an advisory firm for close to a decade, really building my knowledge of the industry, handling all the marketing communications, the COI relationships, the client events, the marketing plan implementation, all of that, everything that I could do without being licensed, and I loved it. And then in 2008, a series of events, the advisory firm had to close, and the turn of the market in 2008, I decided to consult. I've been consulting ever since, and I've been at that time I was working with local advisory firms, wholesaler firms, really being that in-house implementer for marketing plans and for events. I never really realized that it was hindsight's 2020, they always say. Now I realize that it was very rinse and repeat. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. We would do an event because an advisor or a wholesaler saw another advisor do it, or their coach advised them to do it, or the broker dealer suggested they do it. And it was, again, very rinse and repeat, not strategic at all. I didn't realize that until the beginning of the pandemic. Elyse and I met through a mutual friend at that time to support and collaborate with each other like everyone was doing at that time. And her background is completely different and has very strategic event planning experience. And when we were talking, I was realizing that the advisor marketing implementation and event planning wasn't strategic at all. Fast forward, we developed and founded Event Advisors, that's exactly what we do. We work with advisory firms and wholesalers and broker dealers to create really strategic, meaningful events to deepen those client relationships.
Understood. And I hope you continue to thank your mutual friend for making the introduction because you guys are doing some cool stuff. Elyse, give us a sense of your background. So, as Angela alluded to, you're from the industry as it relates to events, but you're not from the industry as it relates to financial services, which oftentimes I think is there's pros and cons to both scenarios, but I like to lean on the pros where, you have a fresh set of eyes where you're like, well, why wouldn't you guys just do it like this? So give us a sense of your background, Elyse.
Yep, absolutely. And that's exactly it. That's exactly where I come from. So my background is actually in sports, entertainment, and higher education, marketing and event marketing. I was an assistant commissioner for a Division I athletic conference. I've worked on multiple campuses, marketing tournaments and season ticket packages and all of those sorts of things. I even worked at a law school where I was on the admissions team and I put together all of the events for the admissions program. All of those events had purpose. You're wanting to make sure you get the brightest coming into your admissions events. How do you figure out if they're really going to be a good applicant or not? So I just come from this world where events should be strategic. And I started my own business in 2016 called Fresh Perspective Consulting, where that whole idea of understanding why you're doing an event, who you want in the room, what you want them to do while they're in the room, and what you want them to do once they leave the room was how I would help my clients. So, you get invited to a fundraising event. Am I in the right room? Like, is this something I care about, or did I get on some mailing list? So, as Angela said, when we met in 2020 and she would talk about what she was doing with advisors, I would always be saying, yeah, but why are they doing that? Well, I don't know. Like, do they, like, for example, how does a shred day event actually deepen a relationship with a client? I don't get it. So we recognized that as I call it, my inner 3-year-old, who was always asking why, partnering with Angela's experience with the advisors, the wholesalers, and broker dealers was a space that nobody was really talking about, and hence event advisors, because we really believe that this is about replicating your favorite clients, and deepening those relationships with them, so that's how you're going to build your business.
So I've been to a number of different events, in my life, and most of them, they're good, and you go there and you're like, all right, that was a good time. And then there's events that I've been to where every little thing was thought of. And it, like, you have those moments where you're like, I wouldn't have even thought about that, but like that's so nice. Um, so I guess when, if I'm an advisor and I want to do some sort of client event, and usually the purpose is first and foremost is to show appreciation. And then, oh, and by the way, perhaps there is an opportunity to, get some introductions after the fact as a result of that because they appreciated that event so much. However, um, advisors are like me in that I have no idea how to run an event. Like my wife and I ended up eloping because we didn't want to nor know how to, plan and put together a wedding. So we were like, nah, let's not do that. So, but I think I think that I'm a reflection of the majority of the industry where they're great advisors and they're great relationally with their clients, and then when it comes time to plan an event, even a simple dinner can overwhelm them. Um, so I guess walk us through when you guys work with folks, like strategically, what are the first things they need to think about before even booking a venue, deciding what to do, and all that type of stuff? Like, what's one of the first steps strategically?
So why? Like, why are you having this event? Yes, it might be to say thank you, but even saying thank you has some depth to that. We like to talk a lot about event goals, which again is a fancy way of saying, why are you doing this? I want to show my gratitude. Well, why do you want to show your gratitude? And there's this model called the 5 why model that actually Toyota developed in like the 60s or 70s that we'll often use. And you just answer a question and then you ask why again, because when you can get to the crux of that, then you can say, okay, great, I'm going to take that information and kind of put that up against my event and set goals for that event so that I can determine success. So, like an example would be, I want to say thank you to my clients. And one of my business goals, we tie the event goals into the business goals, right? So one of my business goals is to deepen relationships with the female partner of the couple. Again, just totally making this up, right? Thinking about, okay, so what does that look like in terms of an event goal? So those are the types of things that we walk our clients through. At the same time, we also learn about their ideal client. We are marketers as much as we are event people. So this whole idea, and I'm sure you always hear, who's your ideal client? What does that look like? you want more of them. So kind of what do you know about them? And how does that turn into an event? So for example, this women's event that you want to do because you want to deepen relationships, you know that your women clients maybe don't come to meetings that much because they feel uncomfortable. Okay, so maybe we want to do, even though it's gratitude, maybe it's actually an education program because you want to deepen that relationship with them, so that they feel comfortable coming, that they don't, nobody likes to show up to a meeting and feel like they're asking stupid questions, right? So there's a lot of conversation that goes into strategic event planning way before we start talking about event logistics.
And Angela, on your end, what are some sort of additional, maybe even like real world examples of advisors saying, hey, I want my event to accomplish this? Like, what are a couple examples that the two of you have worked on, Angela?
I'll start with one example that Elyse actually alluded to with an advisor that I've worked with for a really long time. One day he had an epiphany that he said, not a lot of the spouses, the wives, are attending the meeting. And he wanted to make sure that the relationships are great. They had the husband-wife relationships were great. So there wasn't a reason that they couldn't come. They just didn't feel comfortable in his eyes. So he wanted to take an oblique approach and really make them feel comfortable as well as deepen those relationships. And so he decided, first of all, let's form a women's group, similar to a client advisory board, a women's council. And then we decided to take it one step further and invited a few women to be part of the initial groundbreaking council, then hosted a brunch for all ladies, clients and prospects of the firm. It was a client appreciation brunch with the intent at that brunch to let them know we wanted to host more events that they were interested in attending. The firm's goal was to get to know them better so they feel comfortable coming into the meetings. So we've got two paths there. So at this brunch, it was a great, fun brunch. We had a flip chart. After a few mimosas, we kind of set the stage. We'd love to do more events for just this group and other women clients and prospects at the firm. What interests you? What would you like to do if we were to host it? And pens came out, whiteboard, the flip chart, gardening, movies, finance 101. They didn't want to feel incompetent in the meetings and ask silly questions, even though any questions are always welcome. They wanted to make sure they were educated with the terminology, the understanding, so they could be an equal player in the meeting. So finance 101, I think I said crafting and brunch and all kinds of ideas. So then those ideas, that flip chart page, back to the office, and those events started peppering into the marketing plan. So the business goal is to deepen the relationship with the female clients. Hold the events specifically for the women that they wanted to attend. They attended, started bringing friends. I remember there was this one, Bubbles and Brushes, Bubbles and Brunch. And it was a painting studio that was next to a little cafe with a little courtyard. So we arranged the brunch, have a few drinks. Again, not a common thing that you have to have drinks in every event, but that was what they were doing is we had brunch, a few drinks, went to the painting studio, and we told them, you're welcome to bring up to 2 friends. But like 2 weeks out, there was a waiting list for this event with the friends, and there was no sales pitch. There was no presentation. It was simply client appreciation, everybody having fun, everyone being cordial. So these women who are spouses and clients really felt heard, appreciated, started developing that know, like, trust with the advisor. And when the advisor then said, Mary, we'd love for you to come to the meeting. Are you going to be joining us? Sure, I'll come. So then the spouses are starting to come to the meetings. And really what that does, regardless of the business goal or the event, the spouse is comfortable coming to the event. The account is of the husband, wife, and the family. So if the husband passes before the wife's not going to feel uncomfortable keeping the accounts there. So there's a reason and a methodology to that. So husband's passed, wife stays on, very comfortable staying on in the firm with the account. Very comfortable then introducing children to the advisor, the account still stays within the firm. So that one little event, that whole goal, it really has a long lasting effect.
Well, my takeaways from that, first of all, what was the brushes something in brunch? I like the ring to it.
Bubbles, brushes, and brunch. There's also paint and Pinot. There's all kinds of fun little. This is before AI. I came up with it.
So you guys will appreciate this. So we're having a baby shower up in Massachusetts, where I'm from, for my side of the family. Well, for us from my side of the family. And that's our more kind of formal, traditional sort of, baby shower that we're doing. But in Florida, there's less rules, so to speak, in that we're going to do it in July. And this was all my wife who thought about this. We're going to just host it at our house, and we have a pool, and she's calling it bellies and bikinis. So So the triple B's that you just mentioned made me think of bellies and bikinis, so I wanted to share. But anywho,
add some Bellinis or some bubbles to that.
Ooh, I like that. Bubbles, bellies, and bikinis.
You could do bubbles because it could be non-alcoholic. I mean, it could be like seltzer water.
Hey, babe.
Except for Dad.
You're welcome. This is what we do.
That's funny.
David, but I'd love to give another example. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just want to say that one of the other takeaways, and as the two of you know, so Dan Allison's referral methodology, that's inside the exchange. He talks about how it, and he makes the joke of when someone's like, well, how do I get more referrals? He's like, I don't know, ask your clients. And that's where his 20+ year career has come from, is teaching advisors how to garner feedback and go through the rest of the process. And what I heard from you, Angela, is, hey, just get the folks in the room and ask them what they want to do. Especially because I'll use the finance 101 as an example. If you initiated that in an unprompted way, in a roundabout way, you're being too assumptive and you're questioning their intelligence. But if they're asking for it, then you're just simply delivering on their desires. And advisors, by and large, aren't the most creative creatures on the face of the earth. So ask your clients what they would like and just do it. It's not, I don't mean this to diminish anything that was said, but it's not rocket science. It's just, hey, have you asked them yet what they want? So I just wanted to emphasize that piece.
And I'm going to jump in on that too, because yes, that's sort of like step 2, right? Like you figure out what your business goals are and how you want this event to do its thing. But that next piece is exactly that, which is ask people what they want. We're asked a lot, well, what am I supposed to ask? And we'll share in the show notes a link where people can sign up for, it's basically like a one sheet that we've created of questions that advisors can ask their clients, whether they want to do a survey. We love when people actually tie it into their meetings. Mm-hmm. Hey, one more thing. We're thinking about doing some events, and we make sure that they're kind of pointed questions, because that's a whole other philosophy that we bring into the strategic places. If you ask someone, what do you want to do? The response usually is, But if you say, we're looking to do client events Where do you like to spend your free time? What are you interested in learning more about? Like kind of giving some guidance. The advisors get some really great information. And where in Angela's example, you're doing the women's advisory board, this is another way to get that information that maybe doesn't involve brunch or making an expenditure early on before you're sure what you want to do.
Mm-hmm. Love it. And Angela, you said you had another example.
I have quite a few, but I'll give one because I want to make sure that everyone listening, I feel that the advisors wanting to deepen their relationships with women is a very common goal. You hear it a lot, and it's a great goal. And a lot of advisors we've worked with, they'll even refine that a little bit more. Divorced women, single women, retired women. I mean, so you can dig down a little bit, but I want to remind everybody that the goals can be, unlimited. It could be want to develop new relationships with your COIs, want to, we have examples for a lot of this. I'll give it a short one. During the pandemic, one of our first projects was an advisory firm out of Texas that really wanted to stay in front of top clients and deepen those relationships in the midst of our pandemic. How do you do that? So we worked to create a virtual event that was very targeted with their goal to really stay in front of them strategically. And what did they want? They wanted to travel. They wanted to see people. So we created a virtual wine tasting pairing to Napa from a vineyard in Napa and a cheese distributed from Oregon. And the cheese and the wine were shipped to the homes. Everybody jumped on Zoom. There was the hillside of Napa, and they were able to really connect. And of course, we planned follow-up during the event to really make sure that that moment lasted for a long time. Not, did you have a great time? Did you like the wine? Did you like the cheese? What wine did you like? What cheese was your favorite? Put those in your CRM. So things like that. It could be, again, the COIs. You want to deepen the relationships, but you want something a little bit different. Have your appreciation for COIs, do a CE, enlist a wholesaler, have a CE luncheon, invite your CPAs and attorneys, start building those relationships. So think outside the box. What is your business goal?
And I'm sure the answer will be it depends. I don't know who wants to take this one, but is there like a sweet spot as it relates to like, hey, no more than 10 people, hey, no more than 50 people? Like I think about, of like weddings that I've been to since we just eloped, you hear from the bride and groom oftentimes that like I just spent time going around from table to table. I didn't actually end up getting to enjoy my wedding. So I feel like there's got to be some sort of cutoff, with the size of events, so you actually get meaningful time with folks. But I'd be curious to know if there's a best practice in terms of overall size.
The best practice that we share with our clients is quality over quantity. So if you can have an event with 500 people and have quality experience, not necessarily one-on-one, but quality experience, and that helps with your business goals and that those people, again, want to be there, awesome. But you could also do it for 10 people. To be honest with you, David, when we are talking about events, and we'll use your wedding analogy, the connection doesn't necessarily happen when people are immediately in that room. Angela talked about this too. One of the differences when you're doing a strategic event versus just a rinse and repeat event is, what does the follow-up look like? Because that's the opportunity to get that one-on-one, and hopefully you've garnered some information like what's your favorite wine, or Hey, I saw, our person who was checking in saw that your wife's pregnant. Making sure, how's she doing? Are we filling in? That sort of stuff is part of what you're going to do in your follow-up. Not so much in the moment, as we call it, in that event moment. Are there certain rules of thumb of like, how many people should you have at a wine tasting dinner? Or a lot of that is going to be determined by the venue, because again, are you trying to create a nice cozy event? Are you trying to make it like, your freshman econ class? So yes, it does depend, but it is quality over quantity.
And
The fact of the
go ahead,
matter
Angela.
is, I was gonna say, so the fact of the matter is, if you're creating your business goal, and you can have multiple business goals, I want to work with the women, I want to work with the next gen, I want to work with the millennials, I want to have relationships with my COI. So if your business goals are very refined, you shouldn't really be inviting your entire database to a single event unless it's, for example, a holiday open house and you want everybody to come in and out. Your events should be, because not all your events are going to appeal to everybody in your database. So when we teach this, that when you properly segment your database, and it can be by, ABC client, it can be by geography, it can be by, how do they like their invitations, or, what time of day do they like to go to events, however you wanted to, sporting events, however you want to segment it, and the event is tied to a segment, it's not likely going to be appealing to other segments, therefore quality over quantity. So it automatically, or most likely, will dictate a smaller number, not a 500-person event. So if you have 20 or 30 to an educational event, because we know that Social Security is we invite all those that are of a certain age and interest to Social Security. Are the kids of these clients going to be interested in that? No, probably not. They're going to be interested in maybe a long-term care educational event that really talks about bridging the gap and having those conversations with your adult children, maybe. So if you're very pointed in your communication and the event that you design, the attendance will just fall, and it's probably not going to be really large for each event.
So we've gone through, and we're just scratching the surface here, of course, but I want to continue to sort of progress to other aspects of events. So we've talked through the importance of identifying, what your business goals are and what your goals are with doing events in the first place, having some sort of North Star that we're working towards. We talked about segmenting clients based on interest or other factors. We talked about getting feedback directly from your clients to see what they would be interested in. We talked about quality over quantity, and I'm sure I'm missing some stuff, but just to help bridge the gap to this next point. And Angela, maybe you can share a couple of examples in that. So I'm either going to use this as a humble brag, or feel free to pick it apart. So when I was an advisor, I did an event. I got finger quotes up now. In that, all I did was, there was a golf tournament happening, and I brought 3 clients with me to go golf. So when I invited them, they got an invitation in the mail, and that came with a sleeve of golf balls and tees that were customized to them. So it had their first and last name, not my company logo. And we went to the event. At some point, we snapped a picture, like got a picture taken of the foursome. And then within a week after the event, there was a thank you note and a framed, whatever the dimensions were, 5x7, photo. And to this day, even though I'm no longer an advisor, one of my clients every, I don't know, 18 months, we'll snap a picture of the picture that's still on this desk at work. And it's just like reminiscing almost. So I'm curious to know, with that in mind, like, what are some cool examples of memorable, uh, call it bookends of events, like the very beginning in terms of the invitation, and then the very end in terms of the follow-up?
I think we both can speak to this, David. And there's not going to be a perfect event that we can describe. It's taking
Hmm.
bits and the pieces and the ideas, and how does it make your event memorable for your specific ideal clients? Again, keeping in mind who your ideal attendee is and what they would like. So always have to keep that at the forefront. Are they drinkers? Are they not drinkers? You really have to think about that. So going back to your event, first of all, kudos to you when you did that, because you hit a lot of those boxes. We were working with a firm just the other day, and they were creating a slightly what we would call an unexciting educational event. I mean, that stuff just is dry. But they wanted to really make it memorable as much as you can. So we were walking through what's the experience, the invitation, the confirmation, what happens when they drive into the parking lot of the hotel, where are they going to go, what's the signage going to look like, really creating that experience, and those opportunities to engage. So in your event, the invitation, really critical. The follow-up, great. So they were excited to get to that event. And I'm assuming that when you invited just the three, you knew that they were golfers, and you knew, maybe you've golfed with them before, you knew their ability. So you knew you weren't taking, someone who wasn't a golfer. Let's go for a ride. And like,
Hmm.
okay, well, I'll do this. We'll see how it goes. And so they're already very excited. And then you created those little special moments along the way, the sleeves, and oh my gosh, and we say this all the time, not giving them balls and tees with your logo on it was awesome. You want to, we all get, when we go to trade shows, and they don't really need stuff with your logo on it, something that's personable to them, and they'll remember you when they see it. And then the picture frame, and what you've done is you created that moment. Again, you said they're still taking a picture of a picture however many years later. They remember that, what we call positive emotional memory, a moment. You created a moment for them, which at the time deepened the relationship, created the know, created the like, created the trust. And when they're going golfing with their friends, oh my gosh, you have personalized balls? Those are some. Where'd you get them? Well, the advisor gave them to, I went golfing with them. The conversation keeps
Now
going.
you're in conversation.
Yeah. So ideas like that, Elyse comes up with all kinds of great out of the box thought ideas, but it's really starting at the beginning and creating that entire experience.
Elyse, on your end, what thoughts or ideas do you have for the bookends of the event?
Um, as Angela said, it starts in the beginning. It starts when in the ideation, if you will, right? It starts with setting the tone from a save the date to a printed invitation. One of the things that we also talk about, those questions you ask your clients. One of those is, how do you like to receive information? Because it's cool that you did printed invitations, but maybe, several years later, they'd be like, just, they're going to answer a text more so than like a printed invitation. So meeting them where they are. And like Angela said, recognizing the cool factor, like these people would really enjoy this. Side note to that, which I also really like about this, is when we're talking about events or we're talking about moments, they don't always have to be ours. Like the fact that you're like, hey, I got this foursome in this bigger golf tournament and I took people versus I know my clients like golf, so I'm going to go out and plan a huge golf tournament. Like, there's no need to do that. And you may be meeting other people who are at that golf tournament who may be doing the same thing. And so that's just sort of a side note. The other thing that I really like about this too is events not only create, again, this moment in time, but we want them to be memorable. And to say memorable, there's lots of different things that can make it memorable. So I'm going to make up a story on your, and tell me if it's true. These three people that you invited are obviously clients of yours, but somewhere along the way, they probably have something in common. You're positioning yourself as a connector to bring these people together. So not only are you getting the picture of the picture, you may have actually spurred business relationships or otherwise between those other people, and they'll think nice thoughts about you as well. So again, it's through the entire experience and being very thoughtful and intentional, and kind of going back to what you were talking about earlier, David, where you're like, I wouldn't even know where to find some of these experiences that happen at events. When you're intentional and you say, this is kind of the end result that I'm looking for, you find ways to make those interesting things happen.
Well, so I've talked with advisors before, and they're like, well, if I want to do a small dinner, right? And I want to bring a few clients, like, how do I know which ones to pick? And you just hit on it, and I want to emphasize it, is clients that you think have things in common or could do something together at some point after the dinner. Because, like, as an example, all the work that Dan and I are doing together, as an example, every time we do something, I think of Landon Troyer, who introduced us many years ago. So whether you like it or not, you're going to think of Landon in that scenario. So it keeps Landon, top of mind. Um, I guess what are some things that advisors don't think about? So they're like, all right, I have this event, invitations are out, I have my follow-up game plan. Oh crap, I totally forgot what. Like, what are some commonly overlooked pieces?
I'm going to jump in first. So you touched on it, but not really. Follow-up. To me, that's the biggest place where people drop the ball. And,
It's like,
and
now
here's
what?
why. I'm sorry, what?
It's like they have the event and then they think to themselves, like, okay, now what?
And that's it. Our mind shift is, and Angela alluded to this, you plan your follow-up while you're planning your event, because, well, lots of reasons, because then you can make things happen during your planning, right? Like, I want to send pictures to the people who are at this event as part of my follow-up. Well, I'm going to make sure I have a photographer there to take the pictures, so I don't go, oh, oop, I forgot to do that, right? Or I want to use my follow-up to show that I was listening and I'm a good listener as their advisor. Well, what questions am I going to have to ask when they're at the event? Or if I have a team, how do I work with my team at the event and prepping them before the event? Like, these are the types of things we want you to listen for, to look out for, to write down notes, so that when we get together after the event, we have this information that we can put in our follow-up, so that it's valuable. Because there's two things that happen there. There's follow-up, and then there's valuable follow-up. The valuable follow-up is, again, these moments that we're creating, but it's also getting more information. Like Angela was saying, with this wine tasting, when we work with them for the follow-up, it wasn't, did you like the wine? Yes or no. It was, of the 4 wines that we sampled today, which one was your favorite? I like this one, or I didn't really like any of them. Oh, really? Well, which one's your favorite? I can put that in my CRM and know they like beer. They don't really like wine. Don't invite them to a wine tasting next time.
Well, it's funny that you say that, and then I want to get some examples from Angela as well as to things that they're like, oh crap, I forgot this. But I have a client, John Kennedy and Matt Marcoux out of Florida, and I forget exactly how they found out, but one of their clients, their like favorite drink was like X, like some sort of iced tea type thing or whatever. So anytime they schedule a review, they stop at the store beforehand and they pick that up. And she was blown away that something she made mention of in passing months ago was now sitting in front of her at the conference room table. So a lot of it is like doing a good job listening. And for those of you who feel like, oh, I don't feel like I know my client well enough, there's a really good book called Conversations by Ivan Farber, which teaches you how to weave in certain questions and talking points to like get to know the second, third, and fourth layer of the clients that you serve. But Angela, what are some oh crap moments of things that advisors sometimes forget?
You don't have enough time. You know what? That's really, David, a really open-end question, because depending on the skill level of the advisor and their implementer and event planner, there it could be anything from you forgot the presentation on a USB drive, you didn't plan your follow-up well enough, like Elyse said, you forgot to mention the details of the parking and where to go, or you forgot you had you needed some ADA accommodations and didn't tell and the list can go on and on and on. And we've developed and we use it ourselves, a timeline checklist that has all these at 8 weeks, this is what you need to do in the planning, and then 6 weeks and 4 weeks and 2 weeks, and then you plan your follow-up in there. So hopefully a lot of that you don't forget. So when it comes to confirming, there's a little card that says, okay, make sure if the room is going to be, you like to have the air at a certain temperature, you let your attendees know to bring a sweater, and you park and allow 15 minutes, ahead of time. For example, doing this Galentine's next week, and it's a brunch spot and a museum that are across the street. The brunch venue is offering free parking versus the museum that does not. So we've arranged for everybody will park, we'll meet, walk across the street to the museum, do a tour, and go back for brunch, and the parking is paid for. Well, it could, for some people, be a little confusing. So when I was there doing a site visit, I took pictures, and in the confirmation, we're having you drive in, here's the directions, you'll see the hotel sign, you park in the structure, grab your ticket, walk across the street, meet us in front. And so we had the pictures laid out, because there's always going to be somebody that's like, I don't understand, or I didn't, they made a wrong turn. So trying to think ahead, and that takes a lot of planning and a lot of events to anticipate. So gosh, when you ask me what do they forget, it could be anything, like I said, from their presentation on a USB to confirming correctly with their clients to planning ahead long enough or far enough to get on the attendees' calendars. That's an open-ended question.
Well, even
for days.
the parking example made me think. So let's say someone, and it's their fault because they misread the directions, but maybe it was your fault in that you weren't abundantly clear and overly helpful. And let's say, for example, they pull into a garage at the museum and it's $40, and they're like, "Oh, I have to." Think about that, like psychologically. It starts off with like, "Ugh, $40. Like I wasn't planning on that. Like this is stupid." Um, you may have the best of intentions as an advisor, but if something like that is forgotten or not communicated appropriately, the event can have the complete opposite effect of what you had intended. So like paying attention to those little details I can see go a long way, so you don't look silly, but also so that you're increasing the likelihood that your intentions match their reality.
And here's, and
Absolutely. And you have to be ready. Sorry, Elyse, you have to be ready to, if something like that were to happen, think of it from their standpoint. So the first thing that came to my mind was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that that happened and the confusion. Let me, or have one of my staff, or so we're going to go with you when you leave, and we'll drive out with you. We'll pay for the parking and drop me off it. So think of
And still salvage it.
something a little bit, yeah.
and here's the other thing, David, and you said this earlier, right? Like, the people listening to this, you're financial advisors, you're not event planners. And we are event marketing specialists and event planners. We're not financial advisors. So when you ask us a question like, what are the things that could go wrong? We've seen most of it. And what we love to do through event advisors is to help people not step in those potholes that we've already stepped in, which is what Angela, one of the ways we do that is our signature event system, which is a bunch of these checklists, like that emergency checklist, making sure you have your USB and your information on there, your check-in sheets, an actual like project management. It's called a Trello board that really is how to plan an event starting at 6 to 8 weeks and taking the user all the way through the follow-up. And it's all designed on things that we have learned. Like, yes, you have gotten that person's RSVP. What does the communication look like between the time you get that RSVP and the day of the event? It's built in there. It helps them literally check the box to say, did I do this? Here are some ideas, because we've seen it and we've done it.
A lot.
A lot. A lot.
The fact of the matter is, if for advisors listening, if we don't want to scare anybody off to not do events, and if you want to do events on your own and you don't have a team, an outside professional planning the event for you, you want to make notes of, do your very best. But if something goes wrong once, make a note of it and start building your own. I'm not going to do that again. However many, we've planned hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of events. There was one event years ago at a very nice restaurant that had great, AV, went there 2 days before, tested it, all of that. Well, wouldn't you know, then the middle of an economic summit, the entire system for the entire restaurant blew. So from then on, now we were able to salvage it because we had great speakers that were able to speak a cappella on their own with no slides. But it was like, what happened? So from then on, I never go anywhere without a spare projector. Yes, it's silly. Yes, it's like, oh my gosh, grab the projector bag, even though you're spending $1,500 on AV. That was nothing that we did wrong. It was nothing that the restaurant did wrong. The whole system blew. You can't, it's like Mother Nature. You can't help some things, you just can't anticipate.
And that list, I'd imagine, is ever growing.
Yes. So actually on that list, there is a mini projector to kind of, if you find yourself in that position. So all these life, it's just like life, something happens, you're like, oh, I'm never going to go, on a big hike with, in the rain without waterproof hiking boots. Do it once, you're not going to do it again. So again, that's an open-ended question, and we have lots and lots of tips on things that we can help you not forget. But that follow-up, it's not a material thing. That is one of the biggest things that advisors forget. They think, oh, I'm going to give everybody a call after the event. That's not good enough. It's just not. So planning a very strategic follow-up plan while you're planning your event is extremely important.
So I don't know which one of you wants to take this, but one of the questions that we ask all of our guess is, excuse me, a book that's had an impact on them. And the book that you two chose is The Power of Moments, and that word has been used quite a bit today by Chip and Dan Heath. I'm curious to know takeaways from that book and why you picked it.
So the whole idea behind it is pretty much everything we've talked about. How do you take these simple, oftentimes everyday things and make them memorable? When I was thinking about why events stump people so much, what I figured out was people, and not just in financial services, but oftentimes just in general, look at the success of the event based on ROI. And when you're talking about events, there's obviously fixed costs, right? A venue, a meal, or whatever. You can't always avoid those. And to expect that you're going to get something equal to or larger than that very rarely happens. So I was like, how do I explain this in another way that makes sense? When I read The Power of Moments, I was like, oh my God, that I had that epiphany and said, if we think about an event as a moment, we can set goals to look at what our return on that moment is. And there's so many really cool examples in the book about these everyday moments that turn into these extremely memorable things. And I'm like, that's the goal. And then when Angela and I became friends and together, I'm like, you have to read this book because it just takes this whole idea and kind of turns it on its head.
And it's a really good book for business and personal. It talks about, you'll be there one day, David, a day at Disney World with little tiny kids. And you think of that, you want this very, picture perfect fairy tale castle day. But the fact of the matter is there's long lines, you can't predict when hunger is going to strike. So there are going to be meltdowns and there's going to be, I don't want those chicken fingers. I want the shake and this, that, and the other. But when you go back home and you're telling the story of your Disney World trip, you're not going to likely, talk about and remember the fit that they pitched in the middle of the 2-hour line, for Small World. You're going to remember how cool Small World was when you were on the boat, and you're putting the whole picture together and creating that moment. And you kind of leave out some of the other stuff.
And moments are powerful because so I went to Disney. I've been there a couple times. One, I was there for a baseball tournament when I was older, so I didn't really experience Disney for Disney. But my main Disney trip was when I was 6 years old, and you brought up Small World, and I immediately envisioned myself on the ride and could see it as clear as day, and that's a moment that sticks. So your point was just proven, and it brought my mind there immediately.
You probably don't remember starving an hour before.
I was a great kid, Angela. I don't know what
There's a video that we borrowed from the Heaths that we use sometimes in our presentations. It talks about this Disney moment. And, Disney does so many amazing things from a marketing point of view. But what they talked about in this video was, again, you're not sitting there taking a picture of your kid having a meltdown. But boy, you get that picture when you get off the Space Mountain and everyone's like, their arms up and they're all smiling. That's what you remember. That's that picture that you're going to share with somebody 3 years later going, remember the time we were on Space Mountain? Or, the one person in the back who's like, oh, and you'll always make fun of them for the rest of their lives. It's that moment, and it's capturing that and leveraging it to meet your goals, whether they're marketing goals, sales goals, relationship goals. That's one of the reasons. It's just a super fun book and tons of examples. Like, even again, as we're standing here talking about it, I think about, oh, there was the whole like syllabus writing thing. And then the one, a kid left their stuffy at the Ritz-Carlton. And instead of, so the family calls in a panic. And instead of saying like, okay, yeah, we'll send it back. Not only did they send it back, but they made a photo album, and they had taken this little stuffed animal to like, here it is on a lounge chair. Here it is in the spa with cucumbers on its eyes. And just taking that extra opportunity, instead of simply just saying like, let me take your best friend and shove it in a box and send it to you. Like, look, it had a fabulous time while
That's cool.
you were gone.
That's awesome. Well, this has been wonderful. And I think similar to what I mentioned earlier in the conversation, we've only scratched the surface. So if I'm sitting listening to this and you've piqued my curiosity and I want to learn more, I know folks can obviously work with you, but I think and forgive me for misspeaking if I'm mistaken, but I think there's a little freebie that you're offering on the show as well. So talk to us about that before we wrap up.
So again, where do I start? And as we say, a good event is based on what your clients want. So we are thrilled to be able to help your listeners figure out what that is. So like, there'll be a link in the show notes where they can sign up to get a list of questions emailed to them that they can use to help kind of filter through. We call it a client insight guide. And it's just like a nice little, there's probably 15 or 20 questions. You can kind of pick and choose which ones work for you. But it's a great place to start.
Awesome.
I think the second part of that, which we mentioned, is if you're trying to figure out, I know I'm missing something, but I don't know what that something is. There's a link for our signature event system, where it's that Trello board with a bunch of worksheets and checklists and all of those things. So you can lean into our years of experience and not step in our potholes. And then, of course, we are actually very active on LinkedIn, both as individuals and as event advisors. So pop in over there, and we're always sharing crazy ideas and maybe not so crazy ideas, but again, things that we're like, oh, okay, I hadn't thought of that. So.
And Angela, what's the website and anything else that you want to add before we wrap up?
Our website is event-advisors.net, EVENT -advisors.net. And you can reach us by email at hello@event-advisors.net.
Awesome. Well,
And then
Angela,
we'll put our LinkedIn in the show notes as well.
perfect. Well, Angela and Elyse, it's always a pleasure. And for everyone who took time out of your day, your evening, your commute, whenever you have us in your ears, we appreciate your time and attention as always. And we will catch you on the next episode. Angela and Elyse, appreciate you guys joining.
Thank you very much. Super fun.